Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Checked In with Splash. Lately, it seems like almost every conversation I have with B2B marketers brings up the topic of misalignment between marketing and sales and just how painful and challenging that can be and how detrimental it can be to your overall event success. So, today I'm joined by someone who knows a thing or two about aligning sales and marketing specifically around events to unlock event-led revenue growth. ZoomInfo's Director of Event Marketing, Stephanie Pennell, is here to break down her top tips for keeping marketing and sales rowing in the same direction, particularly when it comes to events. So, Steph, thank you so much for being here and coming on to the show. I feel like first of all, it's been a while. You were on our webinar earlier in the year, Tackle Your Biggest Challenges. And I feel like we just barely scratched the surface of this topic. And I made a mental note then, oh, okay, we need to get Steph on the podcast and do a deep dive because this is a major pain point for a lot of revenue organizations. And I don't want to say it's a pain point for marketing or a pain point for sales because I feel like that only perpetuates the blame game. We're all on the same team and it's, the challenges are felt team wide. And so I'm really, really excited to have you here and kind of shed some light and share some insights with our listeners on how you approach this successfully for ZoomInfo, because I know that you do. And I personally am like always trying to like take notes, like what's Steph doing? Like, how is she rolling this out? How is she implementing these things? So really excited to get your expertise here. Before we dive in, can you just give us a little background for our listeners? How long have you been in your role as director of event marketing at ZoomInfo, and what did your career look like before joining ZoomInfo? Just give us a little context here, and then I will dive in because I've got many a question for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I was so excited to do this, so I'm glad we could find some time. I have been the director of event marketing at ZoomInfo. It'll be a year in October, actually. So I was originally hired as the chief of staff to the CMO, and
I didn't know
one of the
that.
one of the
Cool.
areas we identified that we could really enhance was our event strategy. So that's when I shifted. And that's quite honestly how my career has gone. So when I first started out, first of all, I bartended for years, and I will hire anyone that has bartending experience because you have tenacity and you have that like gotta move quick mentality.
Yes.
And so after that, I kind of just started working for smaller companies, doing whatever they needed from a marketing perspective, and found that I really liked the events piece. Went into experiential marketing at an agency. And from there is when I started the flop between a business operations chief of staff type of role in events. And so I think it's 4 times now. I tried to leave events to do an operations type role, and then I keep getting put back in events. And I think I'm finally now like, all right, obviously this is where the universe is just like, pushing me here, and I do love it. It is really, really fun and exciting. So I think I'm here to stay until
Until
someone.
you try to make the next pivot, and then you'll be back because
Yeah,
you'll always
yeah.
come back. I'm laughing, Steph, because I so relate to your story. I myself in my career have found myself in this funny little pattern of
Yep.
working on events or doing brand marketing or experiential marketing, kind of on the agency side, then flipping the script and getting into operations. When I joined Splash, I was very much in a similar, like chief of staff like role.
Oh my God,
Um,
so
and
funny.
I feel like it's because at our core we must be event people,
Yeah.
and we can curse a little bit on this show. Like event people get shit done, and so it makes
Yeah.
sense that like just in general, we also can thrive in operations roles, business operation roles, because we're going to get it done, whatever the task is at hand. And there are so many moving parts and pieces to events. Being a masterful project manager is key, and that's obviously a crucial component to operations in general. So I just love that background. And also, if there are any bartenders listening who are trying to break into B2B marketing, events is your path. Just embrace
Yes,
it.
it's natural. We're
Exactly.
we're event marketing boomerangs. It's fine.
Exactly. I love that for us.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Well, I thank you for giving that kind of context and background. I just think it's helpful for our listeners to know a little bit about, what you've been working on and your mindset and perspective. So let's go ahead and dive into the first question. So, really, what I want us to dig into today, you know, kind of five key areas around setting clear objectives, fostering communication, developing that unified plan, game plan, execution plan. Making sure we're implementing lead management, right? It's got to, we have to tie in our events to actual like business metrics and outcomes. And related to that, making sure we're able to measure and analyze the results of everything that we're doing. So, my first question for you is really around how you ensure that clear objectives are set for each event or each program. And how are you making sure there's clarity and alignment around those objectives across marketing and sales? And, how do you loop them in, like literally, like what's your process, how do you begin there? I was just on an internal team call where this came up, just wanting to, we've had this program running for a while, and we're at a point where we actually want to look at our objectives and maybe set some different goals, maybe set some specific departmental goals to help support that program a little bit better. I'm
Mhm.
wondering how you approach that with your work at ZoomInfo.
Yeah, so when I first started working with the team, our small but mighty team, we identified up front like the three main types of events we'd be doing.
Mm,
So one of them is less applicable to probably this audience because they're internal events. So we have been getting more internal event requests. We did like a leadership summit this past April.
nice.
And so that's a little bit different. That kind of is on a case by case basis. But the
Mhm.
other two events are private hosted versus trade show. And so, right from the get go, identifying each of those. So, as a private hosted, that's going to be mostly existing business. I'd
Mm,
probably say 90% to 100, depending on the event. Titles for our attendees based on the event. A good example is our go to market series that we did a trial of in October of 2022, and have kicked it off quarterly now. We try to do two a quarter, and
nice.
that's VP plus. Um, same kind of like 40-ish attendees to have that intimate type of discussion available. Um, and again, mostly new business. So that's kind of that first bucket. The second bucket is any of like the major trade show or larger partner events.
Mhm.
That's obviously more of a mix of new and existing. But then we have different components to those where it's like number of pre-booked meetings. And so the goals vary just based on those two different types. And then from there, we really kind of drill it down to, okay, like out of, the recent Forrester B2B summit, that's a really good opportunity for us to get with analysts.
Mhm.
So there's always that like additional piece dependent on the event. Um, so it's at least a starting point for the type of event, and from there we do work with sales and make sure that we are on the same page.
So, but you're setting the strategy. Like you are setting, like right. Like it's you or your team has said, like, we like I think the go to market series is probably, like you said, a great example. You did kind of like a test pilot in 2022, and based on the results of that, you said, okay, we're gonna make this a quarterly program. We're gonna do two a quarter. And you are, but are you like consulting sales leadership to set those goals, like, even the criteria, listen, our owned events are really going to be for existing customers. I'm sure there are, retention and expansion, renewal opportunities that you're tracking and wanting to influence there? Or I guess that the question is like, how much do you collaborate with sales leadership to determine we're going to do this, we're not going to do this, we're inviting these existing customers to this event or this program, and this other type of program is really for our net new logos and prospects that we're engaging with. And how I'm kind of jumping around here a little bit. I said I wasn't going to, but I am going to jump around a little bit because I'm curious, like, how do you collaborate with sales leadership when there are competing priorities,
Mm-hmm.
and competing and or like conflicting? What
Mm-hmm.
if there's a disagreement around, like what you just outlined what your strategy is a little bit. Like, what if there is a disagreement around strategy? How do you navigate some of those conversations that need to be had?
Yeah. So I'm one of those marketers that loves hearing from sales because they're the ones talking to the people we're trying to market to all day
Mm-hmm.
long. Um, the go to market series actually started as a request from, he was our VP of special projects. He's now a VP of go to market plays and innovation. So he runs ZI Labs.
Mm.
And he was the one that initially came up with the idea. And we were like, yeah, we'll test it. So that's just a good example of like, okay, this actually could have some legs. We tested it. And boy, has it changed a lot since October of 2022, but the foundation is there. So I think that's a perfect example of like, I'm always down to hear anyone out that has an
Mhm.
idea. And if it's something we can fit in and we have budget for and we think it can turn into something, like we'll try it. And
Yeah.
if it works, we'll just keep reiterating it and repeating it and making it even better every time. So even um, we have one coming up in August in New York. There are so many things that we are taking into consideration for that event that have been provided in our feedback sessions after each of the existing events we already had.
Mm.
Um, so I think that kind of answers all
Yeah.
of that. Yeah.
No, yeah, it does. And my takeaway is kind of, one, you said it, but you'll always be the marketer that is down to listen and collaborate with sales. So I'm hearing like, and I've heard this a lot, but I like to hear from your perspective and also like the how, like get into the nitty gritty, like, are you, um, you know, is it like you have this ongoing Slack or like you have like a quarterly meeting where you're going over plans and getting their input? I think the how to of like making sure you're being an active listener and supportive partner on marketing when you're working with sales, being
Yeah.
open to experimenting and piloting new things, are like kind of the two takeaways I just took from that. So I guess my next question is, when I want to dig into, as I had said earlier, I feel like fostering healthy and productive and like frequent communication is so critical. But I want to circle back to that for a second and stay more on this topic, which is I
Yep.
feel like we're really talking about like how are you really like uniting marketing and sales around an event or a program. And so my next question is, when you're developing these plans, how are you thinking through the kind of like responsibilities and deadlines? What are kind of like the SLAs? Okay, you've agreed this is the strategy. These are the event programs you're going to run this quarter. Um, these are the owned events we're doing. These are the kind of trade shows we're targeting. From there, when you stepped into your role, was there already clarity around like, okay, when we do an event or we're supporting an event program, people know what they're doing, there's clear responsibilities and expectations? Or did you have to kind of rework that? And if so, how did you approach that? I've heard from marketers where, you know both sides. I've heard both sides of the spectrum here. On the one side, I hear, well, you know, I don't hear anything from sales, so it's just marketing, kind of barking orders, start promoting, and invites have to go out this date. I've also heard on the flip side, marketing just being like, these are the programs we're doing or the events we're hosting, and then sales leadership really driving the action items, mapping out the to-dos for their teams. And so I'm just curious what the dynamic is like at ZoomInfo, uh, and any pro tips you could share around, like, if there is a challenge with expectations not being met, SLAs not being met, people not, following through on the responsibilities of their role to support a particular event or program. How
Mhm.
do you approach that?
So I was smiling during that whole thing because like we are in the thick of all of that right now, like
Yeah.
making it happen.
Yeah.
So and like deadlines is definitely an area of improvement for us. And just like event timelines leading up to an event,
Same. It's so hard.
it's so hard because they're like you can't even think of like you have to think about it of your internal marketing teams too, like the people creating the content and the graphics and all that stuff. So there are a lot of moving pieces. It's something we're working on, not just my team, but like marketing in general
Yeah.
with our PMs. That said, roles and responsibilities are like really designated when we do kickoff calls, which are also a new thing. And I think the main reason we're still kind of growing is growing pains, realistically. So when I took this role, it was kind of like a little like we were showing up places, but a little bit plug and play, and um, we didn't have too many series that were going on that were our private hosted
Hmm.
events. And I mean, quite frankly, that was still a product of COVID. So like things
Right.
were just kind of starting coming out of being all virtual, right?
Yeah.
So it was like that moment of like, what's the new normal? And
Hmm.
like all that stuff that I don't want to talk about anymore. Um, and so the growing pains for us looked like I came in reared and ready to go. And I'm like, we're going to do this big. We're going to do this. And I got buy in from the sales leadership. I got buy in from marketing leadership. And that caused like a bit of like the growing pains in the sense that like now I'm asking for so much more from creative and so much more from, content. And then from a sales perspective, we're like, tossing to the SDRs like, hey, pre-book 150 meetings at Dreamforce in 2 weeks. And, look at the account managers, like, who do you have in your Rolodex? Like, who can you call? Who can you invite to this event? So I think like for a while, and I was just talking about this with a colleague this week, it was like we were just in execution mode
Yeah.
and kind of continually playing catch up. And like so we have executed really like we did it.
Hmm.
Not always clean. My favorite way to describe event marketing is like you have to be able to get scrappy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my team laughs at me so much because they're always like scrappy. I'm like, yep, time to get scrappy.
Yeah.
And so like now I do feel like with however many months it's been, maybe like 9 or so months of us, we're operating together as a team, and like okay, the company's starting to see like, okay, like they are really doing this, like they are really going for it. And there's so many things, like other things that we're probably going to dive into that are helping to build. My team also jokes that I've basically been a politician since I started in this role.
Yeah. Talk
Like,
about it. Break that down, because that is like the unspoken truth here. Please explain more.
yeah. So events isn't always like high value. It's hard to prove value. So I feel like the only way that we would ever have gotten to the point that we're at, like, quite frankly, and going to continue growing on, is building very strong relationships within the organization, and then showing up. Like,
Yeah.
if there is a fail, you fix it on the spot, in the moment. You don't, affect budget, like, do everything you can to just make all this stuff happen. And so I'm probably jinxing myself, so I'm going to knock on some wood. But we've had, like, only a few things gone wrong that could have been catastrophic. And in the
Mm-hmm.
moment, we were able to course correct, like, live on site. And I think from the relationship building, from them seeing our track record over the last few months, that trust is building.
Yeah.
And as that trust builds, and now we have a dashboard that shows what impact we're actually making, that's going to be like another, like, okay, like another campaign stop, like, okay, oh, look, we did all this, but now we have numbers. And then
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to be like, okay, and now I'm going to start working with sponsors to get us money back, to do like these co-sponsoring things and partner with other companies to do even more things,
Yep.
but stay within our budget. So yeah, it's been like a campaign trail. Like,
I love that. Can you tell me who, you don't necessarily have to name names, but I'd love like titles or roles. Who are some of the most important relationships you feel like you've, you know, yeah, the most important relationships you've forged and have been the most critical to the success that you're speaking to?
yeah, so obviously our CMO,
Mhm.
huge supporter, Brian Law. Um, and then our COO, um, he he's really great. He's willing to always hear you out. And
Mhm.
so that's been a good one. Having his support has been good. Our CEO really is a big supporter too, which
Great.
is obviously very helpful. It's interesting when you talk to them. Um, well, and one more before I kind of get into this, but also our VP of brand and comms.
Hmm.
So we just launched our first brand campaign like last week.
I saw that. So
That's
exciting.
so exciting.
Congrats.
The team did a great job. I really just got to sit back and watch that one come to life, and it
Love when
was
that
really
happens.
amazing. Um, and so, like, we were in one of the meetings where we do focus on, like, sales comes and listens to what we're doing and vice versa.
Mhm.
It's our monthly operating review. And our CEO Henry was like, okay, like, maybe people won't care about the experiential, like, bikes where you race and make a smoothie, but what about the education piece? And I was like, absolutely. Like, there's multiple pieces to an event. And,
Mhm.
like, so his brain was thinking about, like, how do we help customers who might have like a roadblock they're dealing with our product? And what can we do on site? I'm talking about Dreamforce now.
Mm.
What can we do on site to, like, help mitigate that and help them get them to a better place? And I'm in conjunction with that thinking about the brand aspect, the
Right.
awareness aspect. So as you start to talk to them more and more about each of these events, it kind of comes back to your first question of, like, what are the goals?
Mhm.
How much of this event are we trying to push from a brand awareness perspective? How do we Brian said it, like, so well. He was like, how can events be a megaphone for
Yes.
ZoomInfo?
Yes.
And that, like, has stuck with me because I'm like, how can we be a megaphone? How can we be really loud, but then still, pull in the executives for thought leadership and bring in those core users to help them, like Henry asked, create that education aspect. So I think those are, like, there, and there's so many more. Also finance. You have to be
Yeah.
friends with finance.
Yes. That's very real.
I owe, like, a very fancy dinner to at least half of our finance team, like, on me, like,
Yeah.
not the company,
Not
on
the
me,
company, like on Steph's dime.
my personal dime.
I probably
Um,
do too.
yeah, and but that's all part of it too, like understanding how, like, outside of sales and marketing, everything works together too. Of course, product.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like those are the gaps like we're kind of starting to fill as we continue on in this journey. And working with our integrated marketing team. So
Yeah.
I know it's kind of a long list, but it evolved over
No, I
time.
love it. I love the thorough
Yeah.
breakdown. And I think it's helpful for others to understand and hear like who they, should be buddying up with in their organization if they don't feel like they have the support. Obviously, it's clear you have the internal trust, buy-in, and support that you need to be able to grow your team, grow your programs, and
Yeah.
ultimately, produce more results for the company. That's the end goal here.
Yes.
Um, but I can imagine it's even more challenging for those B2B marketers who don't even quite have that internal buy-in, support, or understanding yet. So I just wanted to get your thoughts there.
Yeah.
I want to, oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say a good area to start, and actually I kind of left this out, but um my team like really got close with the SDR leaders. And
Yeah.
that what I think that was actually like a really pivotal moment where like we started getting their buy-in and they were like, "Oh, like this counts as a booked meeting for us." Like figure out how you really just need to figure out on that side, on the side of where, people get compensated for booked meetings and, all that stuff,
Yeah.
the sales side.
Exactly.
Um and figure out like what you can do for them and explicitly call that out.
Yeah.
No, I'll stop
What do
talking.
they care about? What are
Yes.
they getting gold on? And
Yeah.
how can your work literally help them hit their goals, hit their quotas, hit their numbers? Yeah, I think that's always really important. And I think it kind of ties into where I want to take the conversation next, which is we've been talking about, setting clear objectives and kind of like unifying around a shared plan and vision, which then, you know, next step for success, we need that communication to be unlocked. And I'm just curious if you could get as detailed as you're willing to get in terms of like how you encourage that regular collaboration, how you approach making sure updates from your team are being shared out but also like absorbed, because that has been a challenge I hear often is like, and to be frank, I have experienced this in my own role at times, and want to join the Be Real train with you here and say that like we're also at Splash still figuring this some of these challenges out. And I think largely in part to kind of what you said, like we're all rebuilding our playbooks,
Yeah.
maybe not entirely from scratch, but we're all having to rebuild them post pandemic because
Yeah.
the world is so different. The buying journey is so different. The way that people want to interact with brands is very different. And so our approach to everything needs to evolve. That is kind of a side tangent. But going back
Yeah.
to what I wanted to ask you about fostering communication, you know, I we know it's crucial. I would love for you to kind of unpack for us some of the strategies and or like I said, like kind of the specific nitty gritty, like what like tools and channels, mediums. I heard someone recently be like, I'm experimenting with like video updates around events to my revenue team. And I was like, maybe I should do more internal video updates. But like literally, how are you approaching this? How do you, once you decide what the strategy is and the plan for the event, everyone's clear on goals. How do you make sure everyone stays aligned throughout that process, pre-event, during, and then we'll get into post-event in a little bit. But let's just talk about how you're navigating, like kind of just nailing the communication piece.
Well, if anyone follows me on LinkedIn, they probably saw a post from me like a few, might have been even just a few weeks ago. Like, how do you guys communicate to sales about your upcoming?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, you
Yes, I
helped.
saw that.
Oh,
I
yeah.
voted on that poll. It's a
Yes.
combo over here. It's crazy, but I want to know what you're doing.
Yeah, it was helpful. Really, like, I'll start at the top, and I do want to circle back on something you said real quick though. Like, I believe that as marketers, you should never sit there and say like, yeah, we got it down, because something's always changing and you always have to be iterating. Like you think you have a great, campaign around intent, and then boom, AI. And you're like,
Right.
using AI to make your intent better. Like you know what I mean? Like you always have to just be
Yep.
shifting. And so I am lucky that at like the leadership level, um, there is a constant desire to just be talking about where we're at.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that level, I guess like a good example from our, like, as we start to think about our 2024 plan, I'm going to basically build that with Kaylin on the marketing leadership team, who heads up IMMs and a bunch of other awesome stuff, go to market plays
Mm-hmm.
team, formerly like Rev Gen, Demand Gen type of team.
Cool.
And essentially align the events we're planning to do with the campaigns that they want to do, looking ahead. And then also with our partners. So that at a very high level, then, we talk with um, the sales leadership, get their buy-in. That's where we kind of really start. When it comes down at the like monthly communication level, we have, I think I mentioned it really quickly, monthly operating reviews.
Mm-hmm.
There are ones for basically each different go-to-market team. So we have a marketing one, and that's where we update sales leadership and like, product leaders and anyone else who can come and hear what happened in the previous quarter and what the looking forward motions are.
Mm-hmm.
And the same for sales. And so that's where we align on, like, I find out, for example, if there's a desire to target our renewals more, that's when we pull a list of our upcoming renewals and push them hard for our upcoming events. And like, it's kind of an all hands on deck.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that's like that next level. And then on the event level, um, we are in it here too.
I just love that you're being real. Thank you.
Oh,
Nobody has
I'm
it all figured out. And if, to your point, if
no.
you feel like you have, you're missing something.
No, if anyone listening to this or watching this thinks I didn't just put makeup on like 10 minutes ago before I jumped on this call and still have my workout clothes on from this morning, you are absolutely wrong. Um,
I love it. Same.
so, yes. So, I mean, it's life. No one's perfect. We are doing all the things leading up to Dreamforce. So now it's about 2 months out. And there are a couple things that we are launching next week. Some things we already did. So we launched the internal marketing kickoff.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important to mention here because we want to set our internal team up for success for the things that we are going to need them to support us on to be successful at the event.
Yeah.
So that kickoff happened a few weeks ago. As of right now, we have a bi-weekly stand-up. A month before, we're going to switch to weekly. It's a really quick, like, run down the line of here's what's coming up. What's your status? What's your blocker? Who needs to approve? Move on.
Mm-hmm.
Less of a discussion around like anything else. It's really just like a check-in.
Mm-hmm.
Then starting on Monday, I guess like one step back, as part of like the MOR level, we do say to sales leaders, hey, this is our plan for this. Are you aligned? If yes, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
So at this point, we've had sales leadership involved. So next week is like the real kickoff week. So on Monday, we have a company-wide Slack channel, and
Mm-hmm.
we're doing a post about Dreamforce in there. And then based on what department you're in, how you can support. So even if you're in engineering, you have a LinkedIn, you can post, you can, hit up your friends there that
Mm-hmm.
way. If you're in sales, you can help us pre-book a meeting. I'm a firm believer that if you are going to a big event like that and you are not trying to pre-book meetings, get out of here. Last year, last year we had 2 weeks and we booked 154 meetings before even showing up. So it can be done.
That's my next question. We need to know the how. We need to
It
know the
can be done.
how. The secret sauce. Please tell me the formula, because I don't want to tell you how many pre-booked meetings we had going into one of our big conferences in Q2. It was not 150.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I guess like the next step kind of includes that. So we know sales leadership is bought in. And now it's like getting down to the people that are the boots on the ground. So we have 2 sales focused kickoffs this week. So people can decide which one they want to go to. And we
Mm.
targeted frontline managers for SDRs and account managers. So anyone that is managing an IC.
Yep.
And they're the ones who are like very hungry to get their teams involved. So those calls will be announcing any like spiffs we have, an overview in general of like what we have going on at the event,
Mm-hmm.
and just really getting people hyped up and allow space for them to ask questions and walk through the workflow of what booking a meeting looks like, anything that's entailed with it.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, we'll have a Slack channel dedicated to the event that anyone in the company can join, and we'll just do running updates there. And then we're going to host, actually, this is our first time trying a lot of this. So, like, follow up in
Love
like 3 months. um, then we're going to host a weekly office hour. And me and my team are going to sit there for not actually an hour, probably 30 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and just let people come in. If they have questions, they can pop in, ask their questions. If they have, someone interested in meeting with our CEO, like, how do we, can we navigate that?
That's awesome.
And then anytime we can also be heard on sales meetings, we just try to squeeze our way in there as well. So
I love that. I thank you for the thorough breakdown. Definitely going to have to rethink what our kind of internal comms plan and strategy is. We're doing some of that. We're not doing the office hour type thing. Yep, that's really smart. Another idea that I actually got from one of my good friends who is a revenue enablement leader at Webflow, is this concept of a tiger team. Do you have one of those? It's like she has, her tiger team is like at least one rep from each role to kind
yeah,
of just like pilot, provide feedback on new programs, new resources. I love that, your, like you said, your kind of like department leaders and managers are really hungry to make sure that their reps, their teams have everything that they need to be successful in their role
yeah.
related to supporting the event, especially something as big as like a Dreamforce. um I'm curious if you like have your unofficial tiger team. I kind of have my unofficial tiger team. I'm probably going to turn it into an official one when I'm back
Yeah.
from my little 4 week sabbatical. But do you have, or do you just feel like you don't really need that because the managers are so involved and so like on it that you don't really need that?
It's so funny. I always laugh when someone says Tiger Team because I've like my last company we had them, and we had them for a short period at ZoomInfo too. And I'm like, if someone out there knows where the name Tiger Team came from, I would just love.
I don't know. It was not
Right?
me.
No one knows.
No one knows.
So this is my brain. This
That
is
is your
how I
origin story.
um, so the answer is yes and no. We had them and it wasn't quite working for us. And
Mm-hmm.
so what we realized we needed is, when I mentioned IMMs, the integrated marketing team.
Mm-hmm.
So those are integrated marketing managers. And in a way, they are tiger teams.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really just we have core people dedicated to sales OS versus marketing OS versus DAS
Mm-hmm.
and so on and so forth. And, so all the things that are encompassed within our product.
Yeah.
And they have their core leaders that they go to from a sales perspective, from a product perspective, other areas within the business to kind of fill the gaps. And they then kind of drive part of what we do at our events. So we base our brand messaging and content and anything that we're presenting at an event off of those campaigns that have been
Mm-hmm.
identified by the IMMs in
Mm-hmm.
part with. So it's like
That makes sense.
it's integrated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Integrated. So yeah, for better or for worse, it's like kind of a tiger team, but not really. And I it's fairly new for us, and so I see it making a difference, at least for us. Like we know exactly who to go to for things.
Mm-hmm.
On the sales side, it is a little bit more like we are still our sales org is huge, right? So, and people get promoted and shifts happen.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I think like if this frontline manager tactic works for Dreamforce, it probably will be the way we attempt to go for the future events as like a continued test.
Yeah.
Because then it'll hit every product and every team.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes a ton of sense. Thanks for commenting on it. I just had to ask because it's something I've been toying around with myself, and sounds like
Yeah,
you have your own version of that, anyways, in place. Okay, so I feel like now is the time I want to pivot again in our conversation. We are going to get into a part two, folks, here, but just to recap part one of our conversation, I feel like we've covered a lot of ground. At least we went pretty deep on, you know, navigating how to set objectives and goals for events and making sure that they are aligned with business objectives, with sales priorities. Maybe, you know, you have different business lines, different go-to-market priorities. So making sure that is all cohesive. We talked about really just like once you have that established, that those objectives established, making sure you have the buy-in, the unification of team
mhm.
revenue, especially at the leadership level, because you know those are the people that are going to be really coaching to you know certain playbooks and making sure everything's executed. And we talked just now about how to kind of get through some of the communication roadblocks that tend to pop up. Um, just how to avoid those pitfalls altogether. For part two, folks, we are going to get into, you know, talking about how you are capturing and qualifying and distributing event leads. We're going to get into Steph's ideas and tips and suggestions around, you know, approaching a post-event playbook, because of course, if you're doing, you know, your revenue generating events need to lead to revenue at the end of the day. And so the revenue doesn't necessarily magically appear just because you host an event, right? There's a lot of work that goes in post event that makes, you know, makes that revenue real. And I want to get into that, and also measuring and analyzing results and making sure I'm capturing some of your wisdom when it comes to using those insights to inform future strategies. So folks, we're going to pause here. Hopefully you loved part one. I've gotten a lot of gems from this, and definitely tune in to our part two of this conversation. And Steph, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.